Welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we have a little bit of a special episode for you. This is our episode on canning. So this is a proper canning procedure we're going to be doing this with a pretty high sugar jam that we're making, and that's going to be next week's recipe for the channel. But we do want to show you some basic canning abilities. So there's no ingredients here. We're getting started with a nice big stock pot. We've put a cloth in the bottom just so that the jars don't rattle against each other or anything. And these are new lids, and the rings don't need to be new as long as the lids are new or they don't have any scratches or scuffs or dots of rust or anything. You can reuse them, but you have to be very careful that they are very, very pristine. So everything in there, we're going to bring it to a boil, and then once it's boiled, we're going to take it off the heat. This is just to get it up to sterile temperature. Now, normally you would use, as you can see here, normally you would use a jar lifter. We don't have one, and you can just use tongs. You have to be extra careful because they don't have grip. So you want to just take everything out carefully. We're going to place it on a towel. Don't touch these. They are incredibly hot, but we just want to let them dry a little bit before we start to use them. So these are all now, they've been boiling. They're sterile. They're in great condition for our canning. So we're just going to take everything out of here. Make sure that's a good clean towel, and we're just going to let everything cool down a little bit so that we can handle it while we're doing the actual canning process. So we have a canning funnel. You do need one of these. This is the only really specialized equipment that you absolutely cannot do without. You can do without the jar lifter with tongs, but you need the canning funnel because you just need to make sure that you're not getting any of the whatever you're canning on the outside of your jar. Now, if as we did here, if you accidentally put a little bit too much in there, do not lift that funnel out of there. And this is why you see us doing this over a tray. We are going to actually scoop some out and make sure that we're not making a mess. Some may escape around the outside, but you don't want to lift that funnel if you've put too much in. You definitely want to scoop it out first. Now, if you did put a little bit too much in, as we did here, you want to make sure, it's really important, as Chef Caleb is pointing out, really important that the rim is clean. You also want the threads to be clean, but that's just so that it's easier to open later. But the rim has to be clean before you move on to the next phase. Now, this is not easy to do because they're very, very hot, as you can see. Now this is the apricot jam that's going to be next week's video, apricot raspberry. Now the lidding it is a little tricky, so we need to make sure that they are on all the way, but not really, really tightly on. Just finger tight, you don't want to wrench them on. They need just a little tiny bit of room. This is mostly tricky because, again, both the jars and the content are very, very, very hot, so it's tough to handle these. So you want them on all the way, but you don't want them just like wrenched, like cranked all the way on. So once we've done that, once everything is in the jars, we've got our new lids on there. They're going back into their hot water bath. So these are going to go back into this stock pot. Again, you want to make sure everything's covered. You may see a few bubbles coming up as the water gets into the threads. Don't worry, you're not generally, as long as it's a little tricky getting it right on the money as far as how tight they should be, but as long as you have good contact underneath and the jar, the ring is on all the way, it should be fine. You shouldn't have water getting in there. So once it's come to a boil, we're going to set our timer here. Now the amount of time you use to boil the jars is going to differ depending on what you're canning. So these are high sugar. We're only going to boil these for probably about 10 minutes, and they will be shelf stable at room temperature unopened for probably about a year. Anything fermented that has a good high salt content or anything like that, again, doesn't need an extremely long time. And this will make it shelf stable for, again, about a year. It will stop the fermentation and all that sort of thing. If you're looking to can something like soup, you're going to want to boil it for a bit longer because it doesn't have the super high salt content or sugar content that a jam, jelly, or something fermented will. So that's it. That's the whole process. Now, in the description below, we are going to link to sort of some best practices on a government canning site. Just to give you some ways to do it that are recognized as best practices, and that's it. So if you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. And remember to love your food.